Caregivers, have you ever felt like nothing? I mean, nothing is going right? Well, cheer up and welcome to Dave the Caregiver's Caregiver radio program, where you'll learn how to avoid that dreaded thing called caregiver burnout and how to survive the grief process. You know, with roughly 100 million caregivers in the U.S. and Canada alone, that's about a third of the population. That means that everyone probably knows someone caring for a loved one. Join Dave and his guests now and every Wednesday at noon Pacific Time as they discuss avoiding caregiver burnout and surviving grief. So find a comfortable place to relax, kick up your feet, and prepare to feel better and to receive practical tips and tools that you can start using immediately to get you through today and every day so you can survive your tomorrows. But not just survive, but to live life fully and abundantly. Yes, you heard me right. That is a possible goal to achieve. And now, here's your host, Dave Nassaney. Hello, Savannah, Georgia, coming to you live. At least it's live for us. On the East Coast and Manhattan, I presume, for Adrienne over there on the East Coast as well. So this is the first time that we're both in the Eastern time zone. And so welcome, Adrienne, to the show. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I had myself muted because I was coughing. Yes, I can hear you just fine.
So this is a special show. I don't have a lot of my equipment with me. I'm not in my sound studio. I don't even have my script with me. So this is live. What you see is what you get. And so I'm in my hotel room. Hopefully the internet for the hotel is fast enough to produce this show. And I'm on my national book and media tour. I've been traveling all across the country, going everywhere on all the 4 major networks, just sharing my important message, how to prevent your loved one's illness or disease from actually killing you. So anyway, a third of caregivers approximately actually die before their loved ones do. And the rest of them, you know, the lucky ones that don't die, well, they just become sicker than their loved ones do, and they need eventually their own caregiver. And so you should see the shock on the host's face when I quote that statistic. It's like, oh my God, you know. And then you can just see their mind start thinking, oh, my elderly parents, you know, one fall away. So it's been fun. I just did my 13th morning show this morning in Savannah, Georgia. And tomorrow I'm off to Atlanta, Georgia. We will be talking to more producers face to face and booking more shows because I finished the first leg of it and now we're going to start the second leg. And so, you know, we're talking about my book. It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. Like I say, it's perfect for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but they just don't know how. And I say that because there's caregivers out there who don't know they should be putting their needs first. They think that they should be getting the crumbs. And if there's no crumbs, then they should be getting nothing. And those are the ones who burn out. And I've tried to talk to them. I'm sure you have also, Adrienne. I don't think we will ever convince them different, that their life is equally worth of value as their loved ones. They just don't get it. And I'm not sure what percentage of caregivers feel that way. Maybe it's the 30% who actually die, you know, before their loved ones do. That would make sense. But you know, so theoretically speaking, my book is only to 2/3 of the population because the other third is hopeless and will never reach them. I mean, I know that's a negative thing to say, and I don't confess that, and I don't proclaim it. We're going to try to win all of them, 100% of them, because as long as there's breath in their lungs and blood through their veins, we can save them.
Where there's life, there's hope.
So how are things in New York today?
A little.
Same old?
It's fine. It's in the 40s. It's sort of balmy, actually. A little more humid than you would expect in that temperature. It's actually kind of nice. Let's see. I'm going to look up the temperature for us. 47. So that's not bad.
What is it again?
47. What is it where you are?
It's about kind of what it feels here.
Yeah.
How far is Georgia from New York?
um, well, I don't know. I've made it by car without stopping. I'm going to go back. I used to live in Atlanta in a former life.
Really?
Long,
So
yeah,
what
1970. Long
what
time
should
ago.
what should I expect? All I know about Atlanta is it burned during the Civil War.
Oh, you're going to Atlanta?
Tomorrow, yeah.
I, what should you? I
The
haven't
CNN
been to
building,
it.
the CNN building down there for several
Nice,
days.
nice.
Yeah.
I was there when downtown consisted just of the Hyatt Hotel.
Mm.
There weren't many new buildings down there at all. It was just as the boom started, and they'd build
Yeah.
underground Atlanta. And there were lots of antiques, and it was fun to be there. I don't know what it is now. I haven't been there in about at least 20 years.
Well, I know it's the number 4 market in television,
Oh,
so they
yeah.
must be doing very well. Second only to LA's, New York, not in that order. New York, I think, is first, and then LA and Chicago, and then I think it's Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
It's a big
so
city, yeah.
it is. It's a big city,
Mm-hmm.
and so let's talk about caregiving here. You know, it's just so sad because so many caregivers are are just struggling, and they're such
Yeah.
good people. You know, I wouldn't feel. Well, I don't want to say that. They're just such good people. You know, and it's like good people shouldn't have to suffer that much. You know, there should be enough karma in the world to make good people have a good life, etc. But I don't know. I think people just have to understand that there's personal responsibility with life, and you know what you reap, you sow, and there's decisions to make. And of course, caregivers aren't to blame for the plight they're in. I mean, all of a sudden, a loved one gets sick, and now they're in many cases the only one who
That's
has
correct.
volunteered or who is even able to do it. So they do it out of obligation. They do it out of guilt. They do it out of love. You know, there's positive and negative reasons they do it for. It depends on the motive of the caregiver. But I think generally most people do it because they love the person. If it's a parent, you know, they feel like, well, this person has given me life. They've taken care of me when I was helpless, and I need my diaper changed. Now they're helpless and they need their diaper changed, and you know that's very admirable
Well,
attitude to have.
that wasn't my situation when I ended up caring for a parent. Um, there are a lot of people who do not like their parents.
Really.
My father was one of the 1/3 of caregivers who died before the person they were caring for. And my mother survived him, and she and I never got along. And I promised him that I would be there for her so that he could die peacefully, which he did. And I kept my promise to him. I promised him that I would take good care of her and that I would be there for her. And I did it
So
for
it was an
him out of
obligation.
love. I did it for him out of love.
Okay.
And for her, she was just lucky. She was
Yeah.
damn lucky. She was damn lucky to have my husband as in her life, because he paid for me to go down and he paid for me to come up and rent the car and stay at the hotels and all that stuff. And there
Yeah,
are
you know, I
little
did a
button
show.
heads along the way.
I did a show a long time ago. Go ahead. I didn't know you weren't
Yeah,
finished.
no, I wasn't finished. There are a lot of caregivers, especially female caregivers caring for their mothers, who have problems with it, have
Sure.
had problems
There's a
with their
dynamic
mothers
between a
all
mother and
along.
a daughter anyway. A lot of mothers
Yeah,
and daughters, they love each other, but they just don't get along. They just irk each other, and there's so much like the mother is still treating this adult woman like a child, and still,
or she's
there's just a lot
jealous.
of therapy. A lot of therapy needs to be going on there.
Yeah,
But
on both sides.
yes. So why don't we take a break first before we get into what we're going to do? Dave Nassaney, the Caregiver's Caregiver, has just released his 6th book entitled It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. It was specifically written for caregivers who know they should be putting their needs first, but just don't know how. Dave is the sole caregiver to his wife, Charlene, since 1996. He knows firsthand what caregivers are going through, because he is one. And he now speaks all across the country, offering caregivers his incredible caregiver support package. Even the airlines tell us that in the event of an emergency, to put your oxygen mask on first before you help your child with their mask. They know that those who don't heed their advice often black out, thus becoming unable to help either themselves or their child. And caregivers are exactly the same way. It's My Life Too. Reclaim your caregiver sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. Will help caregivers who are neglecting their sleep, diet, and social life, and learn to put their needs first. Pick up your copy today, or buy one for your special caregiver. On sale everywhere, and at caregiverscaregiver.com. So we're back with Adrienne Gruberg and Dave Nassaney, and we're talking about caregiving, and we're talking about specifically, it's my new book. It's My Life Too, Reclaim Your Caregiver Sanity by learning when to say yes and when to say no. And there's such a funny thing I do about guilt. I have a coach, and he's just teaching me to be more dramatic about it. So, we talk about the 3 largest reasons that caregivers don't. Uh, how do I put it? I'm all tongue tied here, isn't that? So I do 3 radio shows, and I'm on my television
Well,
shows, and I'm
sounds
just all
like
tongue tied. I forgot about the show when you paged me. I was laying down in my room just saying, "Oh, what a nice afternoon." And it's, "Oh my gosh, we got a show to do."
well, I mean, if you
So
want,
maybe
we
I'm
can do it later. I mean,
no, 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 no.
if you need
So
to
maybe I'm
rest
just a
and
little
get on
delirious
time.
from the post-nap delirium, that's what it is.
Okay.
So one of the mistakes, that's the word I was looking for. One of the mistakes that caregivers make is that they allow guilt to influence their decisions. And so I call it the Sanford and Son Syndrome. If you remember back in the 70s, there was a show, and Lamont Sanford was the caregiver of Fred Sanford, who was an elderly gentleman who had a junk business. And Fred was always guilting his son into doing stuff that he shouldn't be doing. And you remember how he did it? He said, "Oh, it's the big one. Elizabeth, Elizabeth, I'm coming for you, honey." And so that's that the host usually ends up cracking up because he wasn't expecting that. And so it's so true. Caregivers um, are dealing with guilt, and a lot of times they don't know where it's coming from, but their loved ones, even though they're disabled and even though they might have dementia or Alzheimer's or incapacitated in some way, they still know how to manipulate their caregiver for some strange reason. That hasn't escaped them, and so they can make them feel guilty. I'm sure you felt that with
That's
with
when it's the child. That's when it's the child.
uh, yeah,
You know,
children
the
do that
parents
too,
can
don't
make
they?
the no, I mean, the parents can make the children feel guilty. Like, I did this for you. You need to do it for it's your turn to do it for me. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. So
whether you
what's
like
the
it or
cure for
not.
guilt? I tell people, you've got to just treat guilt like a diaper. Guilt is like the traffic cop of your conscience. it's a good thing. We don't want to get remove guilt, because society would crumble if we did. But if you're feeling guilty, I would tell people, if you're feeling guilty as a caregiver, stop and ponder and think and just examine your conscience and say, now wait a minute, I'm feeling very guilty about this. Someone is making me feel guilty. Do I have any right to feel guilty?
Do I have
Um,
any reason? You always have a
that's what
right
I'm
to feel good.
That's what I
Reason
meant to
to
say.
feel
Do I
guilty.
have any reason? I'm having trouble with words today. Do I have
All
any
right.
reason to feel guilt? And if the answer, if you're not sure, then ask someone you trust, like Dear Abby, or your brother, or
Right.
your somebody, and say, listen, here's the situation. This is what happened. Do I deserve this guilt or not? And if they agree with you that no, you don't deserve this guilt, and they'll talk you through it and say, they had no right to throw that guilt on you. That was totally inappropriate, blah, blah, blah. And so if that's the case, then you can, with a clear conscience, say, okay, this is undeserved guilt. Now, there's deserved guilt, there's undeserved guilt. This is undeserved guilt. And with undeserved guilt, you just say, okay, I'm going to wrap it up like in a diaper, like the poop is the guilt, and I'm just throwing it away, because that's what you
Right.
do with dirty diapers. You throw it away, and you got to throw the guilt away. And it's hard for some people to throw guilt away because they're so used to feeling guilty all their life. I I don't know if you ever watched that show, Everybody Loves Raymond,
Of
but there
course.
was a character in there, Robert Barone, and the guy, all you had to do was look at him funny, and it's like, what did I do? It's like the guy was riddled with guilt because his mother made him feel guilty all of his life. And so just one little trigger, boom, and caregivers are like that too. And it may take years of therapy to get over that. Hopefully not. But hopefully all they need to do is listen to my radio show and read my book, and they'll be done with their guilt. But, we can
I
only
mean,
hope.
sometimes as it doesn't matter whether or not you understand what's motivating you, or what's making you feel guilty. If you just say, okay, I'm doing this and I'm not going to feel guilty about it.
Does
It
that help?
doesn't matter whether or not you understand it. If you start doing something better, if you start doing something for yourself,
Yeah.
you're going to feel better. And it's like in the 12-step programs, they will tell you it doesn't matter why you stop. It just matters. You don't need to understand all the psychological reasons. Just stop. You can go back
Stop
years
feeling guilty.
later. You can go back years later and examine it if you want to, but to get your life back on track, just do the right thing, and
Yeah.
you get better.
Yeah.
It works.
Now let's say that there is a reason that you should feel guilty, though, that
Right.
what you did, maybe you snapped at your loved one, or you said some hurtful things, or you withheld something that they needed, like
Right.
you got mad at them and you made them go hungry, that night or something. Let's say you did something really, really mean that you should feel guilty about. Okay, that means the guilt is working. Okay, and what should we do? The same thing. We ask ourselves. We stop and ponder. Should I? And if the answer is obviously yes, then fix it. You can apologize. You can make
Right.
restitution. You can throw yourself at the mercy of the court. You can turn yourself into the police. You can, whatever it takes to fix it.
Turn
And of
yourself
course,
into the police. Yeah.
yeah, well, if you did something bad and you say, I just want to confess, I locked my mother in a closet for 3 days, and I just want to turn myself in. Please take me to jail, please.
Yeah,
you know,
please.
because because that might be better than caring for
Preferable.
your mother. Oh, I'm being really bad here. Forgive me. This
No,
is
that's the
called
way you feel,
dark
though.
humor.
It's,
I know, but
yeah, but
caregivers have to
there is
laugh too. They have to make fun
exactly.
of things, otherwise they'll go crazy.
They go
And
crazy.
now I don't know why Jewish people have a monopoly on guilt, or so it seems. That
Guilt.
there's a stereotype that Jewish mothers are the queens of dispensing guilt. Now you're Jewish. I assume you had a Jewish
Yes.
mother. So tell us all about guilt. Give us an education about how the guilt thing works, especially from your perspective.
Well, mothers are the best at it. I think Italian mothers are just as guilty
That's true.
of
Ethnic.
instilling that kind of guilt. It
Yeah.
has to do with the mother-son relationship is very different than the mother-daughter relationship. The
Yeah.
sun rises and sets on little boys, and they take very good care of them and wait until they're grown up and married until they start inflicting guilt. And then it's usually on the daughter-in-law rather
Do you
than on
remember
the
that movie?
son.
Do you remember that movie Moonstruck?
Sure.
There was,
Sure. Olympia
they were
Dukakis.
engaged. Yeah, this guy was
Yeah.
engaged to Cher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the mother, I guess, didn't like her and didn't want it to happen, so she became deathly ill. So he had to go, and and when she found out that the marriage was off, all of a sudden it was a miracle. She got up from her deathbed and she's fine now, and so yeah, mothers, Italian, Jewish, ethnic. I'm Syrian, and Syrian
Right.
mothers are kind of that way too. They have a way of just realizing that you can manipulate a person by, and it doesn't have to be overt guilt. It can be very subtle, just very
Very subtle.
sneak under the table kind of guilt. And it
Niggling,
just,
niggling little. Yeah.
yeah, like you throw a hand
Yeah.
grenade in your room and you leave, and the hand grenade's doing its job. The guilt is just slowly dispensing, smoke in the room and what have you. And it's just not a good thing. Guilt will kill you. You know, so many people have stomach problems, ulcers, bleeding ulcers, perforated colons, and all sorts of things like that, and then cancer.
Diverticulum.
Yeah, these are all internal things that happen to people who don't know how to get all that junk out and just release it, you know?
Right.
And so it's just so sad. Caregivers generally are overweight, they're under nutritious, they're sleep deprived. They just do all these things that are hurting them, and maybe subliminally, unconsciously, they're just trying to kill themselves because their
Well,
life is so miserable. I mean, I don't know.
think they deserve to have a miserable life.
And misery
They're
loves
paying
company.
they're paying their penance for God knows what, and
Yeah.
that's not true.
And nobody wants to be a friend
I
with
mean,
someone like that, so they lose all their friends. Nobody wants to be around a Debbie Downer, you know?
no, no.
So,
It's I think it's a very interesting dynamic. I find that men will generally either find someone to take care of the person, or I think you're the exception, one of the exceptions here, or walk away. I mean, I know that Steve would never, ever have been able to be a caregiver to me. He would have made sure I had excellent care and he would have been around, but he would not have been able to do what I did for him or what his mother did for his father, because his father also had lung cancer, and his mother was quite the caregiver. But she was also quite the guilt instiller. But you see, I was the daughter-in-law who was there to pick up to pick up the mantle of being a good caregiver to his mother. He didn't have to do that. So
God
that
bless you,
happens
Adrienne.
very, very frequently. The daughter-in-law my best friend. My best friend's mother-in-law is 96 years old now, and for the past it'll be their 50th anniversary next year. It's hard to believe, but I don't remember exactly where I was going with this. Yeah, but her mother-in-law will still think the sun rises and sets on her son, and yet she will call Emily in the middle of the night, and Emily is the one that has to come running. She
Amazing.
doesn't expect her son to lift a finger. He's the prince, and she's got to do all the work. It's not
She's the
easy.
toad.
Hard.
So, and
She's one because
perfectionism.
you're. Yeah, that's the hardest thing. Feeling you're not
Yeah,
doing something right or not doing enough.
yeah, that's such a big thing about caregivers. They think that in their job they have a level of perfection or a level of high standard, and this is another job and they want to do it, but they're totally unqualified for it. They're not ready for it. It's not on their resume. They know nothing about, and it's
Right.
not like you can go training. Like I tell people on the radio show, I says, now is the time to learn how to be a caregiver, because just wait, you will either become a caregiver or you'll need a caregiver, and that could happen tomorrow. So now's the time to pick up a book and start reading about caregiving, not when it's too late and now you don't have time to scratch your head and you're busy changing diapers all day long. And so there's a section in my book is called "Say No to Perfectionism." The whole theme of the book is say yes to this and say no to that, and say yes to this and say no to that.
Mhm.
So I talk with caregivers all the time, and there is one indicator that allows me to predict whether or not they will, with near certainty, become a burned out casualty. Right? You can predict them too, right? The
Yeah.
more of a perfectionist a person is, the more likely burnout will occur. That might surprise you, but I've seen time and time again how perfectionists unwittingly make decisions that set them up for stress-related illnesses, emotional overwhelm, and a joyless life. I know a lot of joyless, careless
Yep.
caregivers. Perfectionists are never satisfied. Since no one is perfect, it's impossible to satisfy a perfectionist, not even themselves. I've met so many caregivers who are ruthless to themselves, never feeling like what they've done is enough. A heavy cloud of failure, self-criticism, dissatisfaction hangs over their heads. I promise you, if you hold yourself to a perfectionist standard, you will, sooner rather than later, be burned to a crisp. Will your loved one do what is it? Will your loved one do everything as well as you could? Perhaps, but probably not. Will they be as quickly as will they be as quick as you might be? It's doubtful. But when they take care of themselves, you give them the opportunity to feel better about their lives and more engaged with activities that make life worth living. And this requires a level of confrontation because with my wife, and my mother-in-law was living with us too when she was recovering. I've told the
Mhm.
story many times that the occupational therapist told me to let her do things for herself. Don't always come to her rescue. And so the classic example, she's reaching for a dish or something in the cupboard. And, I say, come on, a little more, stand on your toes, and I'll push her a little, and she can reach it. Whereas her mother says, oh, no, dear, let me get that for you, and one
Yep.
will develop independence and the other one will develop an invalid. And so my wife is so independent today. I mean, she's a one-armed wallpaper hanger.
Yeah.
She is a gourmet cook. She cooks every single day, amazing food. She
Well,
cleans the house. She does the laundry. She puts the dishes in the dishwasher. I mean, she bathes herself. She goes to the bathroom herself. There's nothing that she can't do. Maybe
I've
99%.
got
Maybe
to
there's
tell you,
1% that she needs help.
the fact that she can put her hair in rollers is just amazing. I don't know how.
Well, she was a hairdresser,
that
so
that
she decided
oh,
she
but
was
that
going to
knocks
do
me out.
everything that she could do before. She decided, she's just going to reinvent herself, the one-armed,
Uh-huh.
one-legged version of herself. And my gosh, she's like, she makes us normal people look like whiners and complainers. I just,
It's true.
she's the hero. Today, I said on the show, everyone thinks Fred Astaire's a great dancer, and he is. But Ginger Rogers was known to say, well, how about me? I do everything he does, but I do it backwards and I do it in heels. So it's true. My wife is the hero. And anytime someone, tells me how great I am or how wonderful I am because of what I'm doing, I says, look at, I have the easy job. Well, I would probably disagree with myself on some days that it's the easy job, but I don't know who has it worse, the caregiver or the care receiver. I think it's a draw. I think we both have it hard, you know.
I think that, yeah, they're both hard jobs, and we should be kinder to ourselves, not just in terms of saying yes and no, but in terms of not being super critical of ourselves. Ease up on
Yeah.
yourself and on
Yeah,
your
be nice
patients.
to yourself.
Be
Because
nice
if
to
you're not
yourself.
nice to yourself, who's gonna be, you know? And then the other thing that I want to talk about is boundaries, you know. Um, Lamont Sanford should have had more boundaries in his life, but he was just a
Yeah,
pushover, and he never learned his lesson because that stupid thing worked every single time, and
every
he
time.
knew that he was faking it, but for some reason he says to himself, "My God, someday he will be dead." He's like the boy who cried wolf. One day, it's going to be real, and so
Hmm.
that would just okay. He would feel sorry for him, but we have to be strong, and we have to be, you know, we just can't let ourselves be motivated by guilt. We need boundaries in our life. So what I put here, boundaries are difficult to set, because they take a level of confrontation, and a lot of caregivers, gosh, they just don't like confrontation. It's just easier to just do it and violate their conscience, and just because it's easier, right? Water
Hmm.
flows meets its own level, they say. So
Level.
boundaries come easily to certain types of personalities, like me, but are very difficult for others.
Like
People
me.
pleasers, people pleasers, and those who dislike confrontation will struggle to implement boundaries. They would rather be offended than be taken advantage of, than confront. Or they would rather be offended and be taken
And
advantage of, and be taken advantage of, than confront their loved one with reasonable rules to ensure the health of the relationship. Isn't that amazing? I am very fortunate to have been blessed with a temperament that makes, I'm speaking of myself here, that makes boundary
mhm.
setting very easy. I am not afraid of confrontation. In fact, some say I like it too much. So that's something I got to work on. People always know where they stand with me and my boundaries. However, I know others that are not so lucky. They resist confrontation like one would resist a root canal. It would be difficult, but not impossible, for these people to learn the art of constructive confrontation. Now, there's two words you don't hear next to each other: constructive confrontation.
Constructive. Yeah.
Yeah. And negotiation, to implement essential boundaries in their lives for their ultimate survival. Read a book on negotiation, by the way, because we're all negotiators. If you have kids, you're a negotiator. If you're a caregiver, you are a negotiator, and you need to like negotiate a good deal for yourself. It has to be a win-win. And like Trump would always say, we have dummies in the country. They're always, giving our stuff away in trade deals, and they think we're idiots and this and that. And part of that is true. My message to you is this: it's your life too. I encourage you to get over your timidity and become more assertive. Take classes or seminars if needed. Attend a codependent or enablers meeting. Now that's a good one. The Al-Anon things, enablers.
Coda.
Yeah, meeting like the ones that Alcoholics Anonymous or recovery groups offer. The benefits will be lifelong. It will really change you. You will learn to change your unhealthy habits and acquire new traits that will benefit all your relationships in life. Healthy emotional and physical boundaries are the basis of healthy relationships. And it's important that the care receiver understands what is allowed in the relationship and what will not be tolerated. This is where it could get very sticky, especially if the relationship is a family member or a loved one. And it's really the caregiver's fault if they're constantly being offended and their rights are constantly being violated, because they probably have not shared the boundaries or what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. You got to have that
In
that talk
in
and say, okay, here's the
yeah,
ground rules, here's the house rules.
Yeah, but the thing about that is sometimes you're really in the middle of it when you realize, oh God, there should have been ground rules here. I didn't go on this long. I didn't know what it was going to be like. Now that I know, and it's hard to go back
It's not too
and
late.
start to
It's not
set
too
those
late to have
rules.
that
No, it's not
come
too
to
late.
Jesus meeting, so to speak,
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I was in a relationship where confrontations, we bickered. There used to be a radio show called the Bickersons, and that's what they called me and Steve. We bickered. It was our fighting was our passion.
Really?
Of all the lesser passions, we liked fighting best. And it it was something that we grew out of when I became the caregiver, and he realized she's right a lot of the time. She's taking really good care of me. He started to appreciate how smart I was and how there for him I was. He started to trust in a different way. Now he had a lot of reasons not to trust people, but because he had lost his sight in one eye in an eye operation, so he was very, defensive about a lot of things. So
Yeah.
I had a lot to learn about how to deal with this personality. But on the way to happiness, there was love all along. But we bickered, and doing it creatively though is what it's all about, so that you have an outcome that's the one that you want, rather than just stirring the pot constantly.
Was there really a show called The Bickersons?
Yes,
Really?
Donamici, and I'm trying to think of who the other.
Oh,
Yes, it was called
gotta
the
YouTube
Bickersons.
that. So it's back
Yeah,
in the days
it
like
was a
Amos and
radio
Andy during
show.
the.
Well,
Ah,
Amos and Andy was actually a television show too.
yeah, first radio though, I guess, right?
Yeah, but the Bickersons
So
never made it to
was it a
TV.
comedy? It was a comedy, right?
Yeah,
The Bickersons.
yeah,
I'll check it out.
yeah. Oh, but we used to make people very uncomfortable. That's
Yeah.
because he never knew when to stop, and it took a
So you would
long
just start a
time.
big embarrassing fight in front of company or something, huh?
Oh God, there were some terrible fights in the movies when he threw a Coca-Cola on a woman's mink coat on New Year's Eve
Oh
one
my
year. I mean,
God.
he was a piece of work, but he appreciated me. There was no question about it. You don't put up with that
Wow.
for no reason. I
Somehow I can't
mean,
see the you who you
there
are
were
today
people who,
putting up with that. You would never put up with that.
no, I
Uh,
wouldn't.
no.
No
You've
way.
grown. You've changed.
Uh, well, and if I had gotten into a relationship with someone like him who was extremely charming and funny and adorable, all of these things he had going for him, behind the scenes was where it all bubbled and came up. So
Wow.
when people really got to know him, it was like, Adrienne,
So it,
you're too good for him. His mother told me I was too good for him. And she was a
oh
Jewish
my.
mother.
Oh my.
Yeah. Well, she changed her mind once 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 I rehabilitated him.
Wow.
Once you start treating people the way they deserve to be treated, with respect, and it starts to change them when all they've been is put down. And that's the way it can be with a lot of caregivers. They've been put down all their lives. Nobody's ever treated them with respect, and they haven't treated themselves with respect. So they have to
It's
learn.
amazing. Well, listen, let's take another break. We're almost to the hour. So we'll be right back.
You can edit it in.
Welcome
Yeah.
back with Dave and Adrienne, and we're just having a special show where we're just talking about whatever we want to talk about.
Life, life.
Life, guilt,
I
boundaries,
wanted to say
perfectionism.
I'm tomorrow, not tomorrow, on Thursday night, I'm going to be part of a panel at
Oh,
the Village Cinema. There's a movie called Gold Star that is a docudrama
really?
written, acted, produced, and directed by this very young woman who was an actress but is now a filmmaker, uh, made with Robert Vaughn as her father, who, when she was born, was 63 years old. So this is a little girl who grew up knowing that when she was 20, he was going to be 83. And she
Wow.
always worried about having an elderly father who would need her in a certain way. And this is about what happened. First he has Parkinson's, then he has a stroke on top of the Parkinson. And I haven't seen the film, but I'm going to be there discussing what it's like to be a caregiver and fielding questions from young caregivers, which is an enormous section of the population, and nobody really thinks about them. Taking care of younger brothers and sisters and their parents or grandparents, nobody gives them any thought, really. So
Where is this
this
going to be?
is a film. This is at the Cinema Village and on 12th
In New
Street
York?
in New York. And then last week I attended a conference, not a conference, an event that was sponsored by ARP and United Healthcare, where what they were doing was looking to brainstorm new ways to think about dementia and dementia care. And there were 5 tables of 6 people at every table and 1 caregiver at every table. And you had, let's say, a designer, a lawyer, a doctor. So you had 20 minutes to come up with all the different things that might be a problem, all the different solutions there might be. And there were these 20-minute segments, and everything was done on sticky pads. And the most creative ideas. It was amazing. It was the name of the company that was hired by ARP and United Healthcare was IDEO, IDEO, and they are a wonderful organization for new kinds of thinking about problems that we face. So it was a great experience. I was very lucky to be invited to that as an expert.
So thank you so much for being on the show again. And how's your therapy going? Are you getting better?
It's not that I'm getting better. I'm having a knee replacement, so I have to get strong before I go in, so that
that's
my PT afterwards is on strong legs.
now that's an interesting concept. I've never heard anyone get physical therapy before knee surgery. Usually it's afterwards, and usually it's terrible. So maybe this is a
Both.
good strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So are you
the
like
doc.
riding a bike, stationary cycle? What kind of things are you doing?
Well, you start every session with a stationary cycle, and then she gives your muscles a little massage. And then you do leg lifts with weights in different positions, and you work with a rubber band around your knees, walking sideways, doing that exercise where you lift your butt up in the air when you're lying down, you know.
So are you in pain when you walk?
Yes.
On both knees?
Just my right knee.
So you're just going to do the right one?
Yes.
Well, good luck with that.
Bad enough.
I hope it.
Thank you.
What's the recovery time frame?
Possibly 6 months. 3 months
My.
to 6 months. It's a long. It's a really. It's a year before you're back to better than normal.
Are you gonna get like a power chair so that you are not totally disabled?
No, they want you walking very quickly. I mean, I
Oh,
will get a walker. I'll have to have a
okay.
walker, and then I'll have to use a 4-prong cane.
Will you
And
have a caregiver watching over
I
you?
will, I will have a caregiver flown in from California for about 3 weeks, and
Anyone you know?
then
Oh, yes, of course, probably.
yes.
Sorry. It's your boyfriend.
And then he'll be coming in every 2 weeks. But I'll have Corey will be in town, and my housekeeper will be around, and my brother is 5 blocks away, and
Good,
I'll be
good.
well cared for. But I will be able to write articles on what it's like being the patient being taken care of.
Oh, yes. Good
Different.
job. Well,
Yeah.
thank you again, and we will see you next Wednesday at noon Pacific time.
No. Oh yes.
No? Yes.
Yes.
I'm talking to our audience.
I understand.
Hopefully we will see you. So, take care and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver radio show. Make sure you tune in every Wednesday at noon Pacific time and anytime afterwards on podcast to catch more of Dave and his tips to caregivers on avoiding burnout and surviving the grief process right here on the Worldwide Block Talk Radio Network. Goodbye.